A grand wedding is about to take place. Suddenly the priest stops the wedding, making everyone panic. What the hell is going on? Is there an old secret hidden behind it? Dear friend, prepare a cup of tea and some food. We will go together on the interesting journey of this story. How are you? And are you ready? Drop a comment and let's go! Whispers of anticipation filled the grand hall of St. Mary's Cathedral, where sparkling chandeliers cast a golden glow over rows of pews packed with impeccably dressed guests. The air was perfumed with fresh roses and expensive cologne, setting the stage for what promised to be the wedding of the year. At the altar, Father Michael adjusted his glasses and glanced at his script. Although he had performed this ceremony countless times, a nagging unease crept at the edges of his thoughts, a vague sense that something was amiss. He dismissed it as nerves, especially since the groom, Ryan Bradley, was one of the city's most influential businessmen. This was no ordinary wedding. The congregation fell silent as the organist struck the first notes of the processional. All eyes turned to the grand double doors at the back of the cathedral, where the bride, Emily Richards, emerged in resplendent beauty. Her gown billowed like liquid light, and her veil cascaded gracefully over her face. Yet as Father Michael watched her approach, his unease returned with a vengeance. Meanwhile, Ryan stood at the altar with a tight jaw and a forced smile that resembled a man finalizing a business deal rather than marrying the love of his life. Oblivious to the growing tension, the guests remained dazzled by the spectacle. As Emily reached the altar, she took Ryan's hand, which trembled ever so slightly. Father Michael began the ceremony with his practiced, steady voice, despite the knot forming in his stomach. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to witness the union of Ryan and Emily in holy matrimony. The proceedings went off without a hitch. At first, vows were exchanged, rings presented, but Father Michael could not shake the feeling that something was off. It wasn't merely Emily's occasional hesitation or Ryan's stiff demeanor. There was an underlying tension in the air, as if the very room held its breath. When Emily took her turn, her voice faltered. She turned first to Ryan, then to the congregation, her eyes darting frantically behind her veil. Father Michael waited, silently urging her on, yet she said nothing. At Ryan's low but sharp prompt, she gave a small start before stammering through the remainder of her vows in a barely audible whisper. The tension deepened. Father Michael's unease solidified into suspicion when he noticed that Emily's trembling hands were not the only sign of distress. Her nails were immaculate, perfectly manicured except for a faint smudge of dirt beneath one, an odd detail he quickly filed away. The moment of truth arrived as Father Michael raised his hands to the congregation. If anyone can show just cause why these two should not be lawfully wed, speak now or forever hold your peace. The only sounds were the soft rustling of fabric and a solitary cough from the back. His eyes swept the crowd and then settled on the couple again. Ryan stood tall with his strained smile intact, while Emily appeared on the verge of collapse. Just as he was about to continue, Father Michael noticed a slight swelling under Emily's veil near her temple, barely visible, yet moving as if something beneath her skin shifted. "Stop," Father Michael commanded in a clear, authoritative tone. The congregation gasped. Ryan's head jerked toward him. "What are you doing?" he hissed. "I need to ask the bride a question." Father Michael's eyes remained locked on Emily as her breathing quickened and her hands clutched her bouquet like a lifeline. "Is there something wrong, my child?" he asked, his voice trembling. Stepping closer, he added softly yet firmly, "Is there anything you would like to tell us, anything weighing on your conscience?" The room fell deathly silent. Emily's eyes flashed to Ryan, who glared at her with anger and warning. Shaking her head, she whispered, "No, there's nothing." Father Michael studied her for a long moment before turning to the congregation. "Forgive me, but I must insist on a brief pause. Please remain seated." Ryan's voice cut sharply through the tension. "This is highly irregular. What is the meaning of this?" With a dismissive wave, Father Michael beckoned Emily to step aside with him. Though she hesitated, she followed him into a small antechamber behind the altar. Facing her, he said, "My child, I need you to be honest with me. Is there something you are hiding?" Tears welled in her eyes as she shook her head. I can't," she stammered. "You can," he murmured softly. "Whatever it is, you're safe here." She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could, the door burst open and Ryan stormed in, his face contorted with fury. "What is the meaning of this interruption?" he demanded. Father Michael stepped between them, his voice firm. "This is a sacred ceremony, Mr. Bradley. If there is truth being withheld, it must come to light." Ryan scoffed. "Truth? What nonsense is this?" "Emily, and I have nothing to hide." Emily's voice cracked. "Ryan, please, enough!" Ryan snapped, grabbing her arm. "We're going back out there, and this farce is ending now." Father Michael's voice cut through the escalating tension like a blade. "Unhand her," he commanded. Ryan froze, his gaze locked with the priestess, as the room seemed poised on a precipice. The congregation, filled with puzzled silence and murmurs of speculation, watched as the antechamber doors swung open. First Ryan emerged, his face dark with anger, then Emily, her face ashen and streaked with tears, and finally Father Michael, his expression set in determination. "Ladies and gentlemen," Father Michael addressed the crowd, "there is a matter that requires immediate attention before this ceremony can proceed." Ryan interrupted with a booming voice, "This is ridiculous. You're ruining what should be the happiest day of our lives." Silence fell as Father Michael's firm tone commanded all attention. Turning to Emily, his eyes softened. "My child, the truth will set you free. Please speak." With trembling hands, Emily lifted her veil, and gasps rippled throughout the cathedral as the truth began to unravel. Her face, now exposed, was etched with fear and marked by something unusual. A network of thin, unnatural veins glowed faintly beneath her temple, pulsing with a sickly hue that was impossible to ignore. "What in God's name is that?" cried a voice from the crowd. Ryan's face darkened as he swiftly moved to stand between Emily and the gawking onlookers. "This is absurd," he bellowed. "The priest has no right to interrupt my wedding with baseless accusations and theatrics." Father Michael stepped forward, his countenance unruffled. "This is no baseless accusation, Mr. Bradley. I believe the bride herself is concealing something that could jeopardize the sanctity of this union." Emily's lips quivered as she whispered, I didn't want this," her voice barely audible. Ryan turned to her, his eyes narrowing. "Emily, not another word. Let her speak," Father Michael commanded, his tone ringing with authority. Emily's eyes darted between the priest and the imposing figure of Ryan. Clutching her bouquet with trembling hands, she took a deep breath and finally declared, "Ryan, I can't do this anymore." The congregation erupted in murmurs. Ryan's jaw clenched. "What are you talking about? You're overthinking it. As always, let us just go back out there and finish what we started." "No," Emily said more firmly, as she turned to Father Michael, tears brimming in her eyes. "I need help." As her confession sank in, the murmurs in the cathedral grew louder. Father Michael raised a hand to silence the crowd. "Emily, you are safe here. Please, tell us what troubles you." Ryan's face twisted with anger. "Don't do this, Emily. You're being dramatic. Think about what you're about to throw away." She shook her head, her voice cracking. "I've been living a lie. This isn't what I wanted, it's what you wanted." Father Michael stepped closer. What about the markings, my child, the light beneath your skin? Emily hesitated and reached for her temple. It started after Ryan insisted I go through with that ritual, she whispered. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ryan's polished composure shattered further as he roared, "There's no ritual, she's delusional." Father Michael's eyes narrowed. Ritual? Explain yourself, Mr. Bradley. Ryan stepped toward the priest, his presence imposing. You're overstepping your bounds, Father. This wedding is none of your concern. But Father Michael stood firm. As long as this ceremony takes place in God's house, it is very much my concern. Emily's quivering voice broke the stalemate. He made me do it, she suddenly said, her words cold and cutting. He claimed it would secure our legacy. The murmurs in the crowd turned to exclamations as Ryan spun on his heel, his face a mask of fury. Emily, stop this now. What did he make you do? Father Michael pressed softly yet insistently. It was some sort of binding ritual. In a broken whisper, Emily replied, He said it was to secure our future, but I never knew it would change me. Father Michael's face darkened. A binding ritual is not the work of God. Ryan threw up his hands. Oh, give me a break. She is clearly overwhelmed. This is all being blown out of proportion. The priest's gaze fixed unyieldingly on Ryan. Exactly what did you bind her to, Mr. Bradley? The room fell silent. Ryan opened his mouth to respond, but then closed it again, his jaw working furiously. Finally he sneered, You wouldn't understand, none of you would. You're all small-minded, clinging to outdated morals. Father Michael stepped closer, his voice low but firm. Try me. Suddenly, the faint pulsing light beneath Emily's skin intensified, spreading across her face and neck. She gasped, clutching her chest as the glow grew brighter. Emily, Father Michael urged, moving to support her, but she collapsed to her knees, her breathing shallow. Ryan took a step back, his mask of confidence slipping. It's nothing, she'll be fine. What have you done to her? Father Michael demanded. Emily's cry choked in her throat as Ryan stood speechless. Then the light exploded, and an unseen, unnatural wind swept through the cathedral, extinguishing candles while guests screamed as dancing shadows twisted along the walls. What is happening? Someone yelled. Father Michael reached for his crucifix, his voice steady as he reassured everyone, Keep calm, we are within God's house. Ryan retreated, his bravado crumbling. I didn't think it would go this far, he muttered. Emily's voice, now layered in hollow resonance, echoed through the hallway. You said that would make me more powerful, that together we would be unbeatable. Ryan's face warped in fear. It was supposed to be a controlled environment. Father Michael stepped between them, his voice commanding, Whatever darkness you have unleashed must be stopped. Emily, listen to me, you have the strength to fight this. Emily's glowing eyes met his as tears streamed down her face. I don't know if I can. You can, he said firmly. Faith is stronger than any darkness. Trust in God and trust in yourself. The light pulsed once more, then began to recede. Emily's breathing steadied as the wind died down, and the congregation watched in stunned silence as the glow faded entirely, leaving her trembling but unharmed. Before Ryan could advance again, Father Michael raised his hand. Do not take another step. Your actions endanger not only this woman, but everyone here. Ryan sneered, You have no idea who you're dealing with, priest. On the contrary, Father Michael replied steadily, I know exactly who I'm dealing with, and so does he. Gesturing toward his crucifix, his gaze unwavering, he added, He does too. Ryan hesitated, then turned and stormed out of the cathedral, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence. Father Michael knelt beside Emily, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "It is over," he said gently. "You are safe now." Emily looked up at him, her eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "Thank you," she whispered. In the heavy silence that followed Ryan's departure, the echo of the great doors slamming reverberated endlessly as Father Michael helped Emily to her feet, her trembling hand gripping his for support. The congregation exchanged anxious glances. "Ladies and gentlemen," Father Michael announced in a calm yet firm tone, "the ceremony has been suspended. Please quietly leave the cathedral and allow Emily the space to recuperate." Reluctantly, the guests rose from their pews. The shuffle of designer shoes and whispered conversations filled the hall as they filed out. A few curious onlookers lingered, but a stern glance from the priest sent them on their way. Once the last guest had departed, Father Michael turned to Emily. "Come with me. We will sort this out in private in the quiet confines of the rectory." In a modest leather chair, Emily sat clutching a cup of tea provided by Father Michael, her fingers still trembling against the ceramic. The remnants of the glowing veins on her temple were faint yet visible. Kicking off her heels, she slumped back, defeated. "I don't even know where to begin," she whispered, staring at the swirling steam. "Start with what Ryan did," Father Michael said softly, pulling up a chair. "You mentioned a ritual." Emily nodded, her gaze distant. "He said it was to strengthen our bond, to ensure our success as a couple. I trusted him, he was so convincing." Her voice cracked. "But it wasn't just a ceremony, it was something darker. I didn't realize it until it was too late." "Did he explain the ritual?" Father Michael pressed. Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "Not really, he just told me to trust him. There were candles, symbols, chanting. It felt wrong, but I wanted to believe he had our best interests at heart." Meeting his eyes, brimming with tears, she admitted, "I didn't know it would bind me to whatever this is." Father Michael leaned back, furrowing his brow. "Did he mention a name, any invocation, or an entity during the ritual?" Emily's face paled. "He called it the Pact of Radiance, said it would make us unstoppable." Father Michael's jaw tightened. "I have heard whispers of such rituals before, of forbidden rites that channel unnatural power at terrible costs." "Emily, what Ryan did was not of God. This pact is dangerous. You are already feeling its effects." Emily's fingers brushed the faint veins along her temple. "I can feel it inside me. It's as if it's alive." Before Father Michael could respond further, a sharp knock on the rectory door startled them both. Rising cautiously and gesturing for Emily to remain seated, he opened the door just a crack. There, the piercing gaze of Ryan Bradley met him. "You have some nerve showing up here," Father Michael said in a low voice. Ryan smirked, his earlier composure restored. "I'm here for my fiancée. She is not going anywhere with you," Father Michael replied, stepping into the doorway to block Ryan's view. Ryan's smirk faltered. "With all due respect, Father, you're overstepping. Emily is mine, she is not a possession." Father Michael's tone turned steely. "She has made it clear she no longer wishes to be part of your plans." Ryan's eyes blazed as he spat. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. It's not just us involved, you don't know half of it." In a hiss, he continued, "The pact is nearly complete. When it is, nobody, not you, not anyone, can stand in our way. Hand her over to me, or you will regret it." Standing tall, Father Michael retorted, "You dare bring your bluster into this house? Leave now before I call the authorities." Ryan glared for a long moment, then turned on his heel and stormed away, muttering under his breath. Returning inside, Father Michael found Emily pacing nervously. "Was that him?" she asked tightly. He nodded. "He won't give up easily. We must act quickly." "Act? How?" Emily's voice trembled. Father Michael reached for a worn leather-bound book on his desk and flipped through its pages. We need to break the bond. The Pact of Radiance ties you to the power Ryan has invoked. If we can sever it, he will lose his hold over you. Emily watched him, hope and fear mingling in her eyes. Can it be done? She asked. It won't be easy, Father Michael admitted, but with faith and determination, we can do it. Night had fallen by the time preparations were complete. Father Michael led Emily to a small chapel adjoining the rectory, its walls adorned with faded frescoes. Dim candlelight cast long, flickering shadows across the room. Stand here, he instructed, guiding her to the center of an intricately drawn circle outlined with ancient symbols. This ritual will draw out the Pact's influence, but you must be strong, it will fight back. Emily nodded, clenching her fists. I will do anything. As Father Michael began chanting in Latin, the air grew heavy. The faint glow on Emily's temple flared, spreading across her face and neck. She winced as her breathing grew shallow. Stay with me, Father Michael urged. You're stronger than it is. The light intensified, and a low, guttural growl seemed to emanate from nowhere. Emily's eyes widened in terror. It's fighting me, don't let it win. Father Michael shouted over the rising sound. Focus on your faith. Emily closed her eyes. As tears streamed down her face, the light pulsed violently before gradually fading, the growl subsiding into overwhelming stillness. When she opened her eyes again, the glow was gone, and sinking to her knees, she began to sob in relief. Father Michael knelt beside her, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. It is over, he whispered. The bond is broken. But before they could rejoice, the chapel doors burst open and Ryan appeared, his eyes wild with fury. You think you can stop me? He roared as he stepped inside. Rising to his feet with unwavering resolve, Father Michael declared, Your hold over her is gone, Ryan. Leave this place and never return. Ryan sneered, You have made a grave mistake. Priest this isn't over. And with that, he turned and melted into the night, leaving behind a deafening silence. In the quiet aftermath, both Father Michael and Emily knew the danger was far from over. Emily slumped in one of the chapel's pews, her face pale and streaked with tears, while Father Michael stood near the altar, deep in thought, his hands resting on the worn leather book used to sever the bond. We can't stay here, he finally said. Ryan won't let this go, he'll be back, and next time, he won't be alone. Emily looked up, her voice trembling. Where will we go? What if it isn't really over? Offering a reassuring nod, Father Michael replied, The bond is broken, but the power Ryan tried to harness won't release its hold easily. We must ensure he cannot complete his plans by finding the source of the pact and destroying it for good. Emily's hand shook as she grasped the edge of her seat. How do we do that? Father Michael turned the pages of the book until he stopped at a worn illustration of a circular amulet surrounded by ancient script. The ritual Ryan used wasn't the first of its kind. These pacts are tied to objects, conduits for the dark power they summon. If we find and destroy the conduit, his influence will collapse. Emily nodded slowly. Where do we start? Father Michael closed the book and picked up a small crucifix from the altar. With faith, he said simply, his voice steady and filled with courage. Outside, the storm had picked up as Father Michael loaded a few essentials into his car. Emily followed, her coat wrapped tightly around her. Where are we going? She asked as she climbed into the passenger seat. Father Michael started the engine, his face set in determination. Harper Manor, he declared. If Ryan is using a conduit, it's likely hidden there. We'll find it and destroy it before he can regroup. The drive was 10 slick roads, and howling wind, but Emily was lost in thought. The glow beneath her skin, the sensation of something foreign inside her, and Ryan's chilling words. "What if we're too late?" Breaking the silence, she asked, "What if we're too late?" Father Michael threw her a determined glance. "We are not. Trust me, Emily, light will always prevail over darkness." In the distance, Harper Manor loomed, its outline blurred by flashes of lightning. The large estate stood in ominous silence as they approached, its ornate gates ajar. Father Michael drove right up to the gates and turned to Emily. "Stay close to me," he said. "Whatever happens, do not succumb to fear." Emily nodded, clutching the small crucifix Father Michael had given her. They stepped out into the rain, the wind whipping at their coats as they approached the manor. The front doors creaked open with a groan, revealing a grand foyer shrouded in shadows, where candles flickered on the walls, casting long twisting shapes. Father Michael led the way with deliberate steps, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. "It's too quiet," Emily whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Someone is waiting for us outside." Father Michael nodded. "Stay alert." They moved deeper into the house, passing opulent hallways lined with dark paintings and gilded mirrors. With every step, the air grew colder, and Emily felt a crushing weight of unease settle on her chest. Finally, they reached a heavy oak door at the end of a long corridor. Father Michael pushed it open to reveal a dimly lit study. At the center of the room, on a pedestal draped in black cloth, sat a circular amulet shimmering with an unnatural light, the same sickly glow Emily had seen reflected on her temple. "That's it," Father Michael said quietly. "The conduit." Emily stepped closer, but Father Michael held out his hand. "Careful, it's likely protected by a ward." As if on cue, the room seemed to come alive. Shadows detached from the corners, swirling into humanoid forms with glowing red eyes. The air grew heavy with the stench of sulfur, and a deep, guttural voice echoed through the study. "You dare defy me? The pact cannot be broken." Father Michael raised his crucifix, his voice steady as he began to chant. The shadows recoiled, but the pressure in the room intensified. Emily gripped the crucifix in her hand, fear threatening to overwhelm her. "Stay strong, Emily," Father Michael shouted. "The light is with us." Emily nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped forward. The glow of the amulet grew brighter as she neared it. The shadows lunged, but Father Michael's chanting held them at bay. As her fingers closed around the amulet, a surge of energy shot through her. "Destroy it," Father Michael yelled. "Break it now." Emily raised the amulet, her grip tightening, and with a cry of determination, slammed it against the pedestal, shattering it into pieces. The room filled with blinding light as the shadows evaporated and the oppressive weight lifted. Emily stumbled back, breathing raggedly, and Father Michael caught her. "It's done," he whispered. "The conduit is destroyed." As they exited Harper Manor, the storm began to subside. The air felt lighter, and the darkness that had weighed upon Emily finally lifted. She turned to Father Michael with a faint smile breaking through her exhaustion. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. Father Michael smiled in return. "The battle is won, but the war against darkness is never over. Remain watchful, Emily, and never lose faith." Driving away from Harper Manor, a new strength seemed to be born within her. Though the future remained uncertain, for the first time in a long while, she felt truly free. Behind them, the shattered remnants of the amulet lay scattered in the study, its dark power dissipating into nothingness. 5 years had passed since that fateful night at Harper Manor, and the city had transformed in subtle yet profound ways. The scars of darkness had faded, replaced by an unyielding determination to fight back against the evil that once haunted every corner of Emily Richards' life. Today, she stood as a beacon of hope, a woman who had turned her painful past into a driving force for change. Now recognized as one of the foremost leaders in the battle against occult forces, Emily had forged an unbreakable bond with Evan Carter, a passionate and resourceful activist whose vision for a brighter future mirrored her own. It was a brisk autumn evening in downtown Philadelphia as Emily and Evan prepared for one of their most critical missions yet. The Radiant Shield, a grassroots organization dedicated to combating supernatural malevolence, had grown over the years, uniting scholars, mystics, and everyday citizens determined to reclaim the light. In a refurbished warehouse turned command center, dim amber light filtered through stained glass windows, casting intricate patterns on walls lined with relics and ancient texts. At the center of it all, Emily reviewed the latest intelligence report while Evan paced nearby, his eyes alight with resolve. "Emily, do you really believe we're ready for tonight?" Evan asked, his tone a mixture of excitement and concern as he paused beside her cluttered desk. Emily looked up, her expression steady despite the undercurrent of emotion in her eyes. "We've prepared for this moment for years, Evan. The darkness is gathering again at the old Blackwell estate, and our informants have confirmed that a new ritual is in progress. We can't let them harness that power," she explained, her voice firm yet gentle. Evan's brow furrowed as he leaned closer. "I know we can do this. You've led us through worse storms before. Tonight, we show the world that the light will always overcome the shadows." His words, filled with unwavering conviction, resonated deeply with everyone in the room. Members of the Radiant Shield exchanged determined glances, each ready to play their part in this high-stakes confrontation. Later that night, under a sky scattered with stars and the occasional flicker of lightning, Emily and Evan arrived at the outskirts of the old Blackwell estate. The mansion, shrouded in a mist that seemed to emanate from the very ground itself, stood as a grim monument to forgotten secrets. Ivy and wild vines clung to its crumbling facade, and broken windows reflected the pale moonlight like watchful eyes. The atmosphere was charged with an eerie energy, as though the estate itself were aware of the impending battle. Standing at the edge of the overgrown courtyard, Emily paused and took a deep breath. The memory of the ritual that once bound her had not fully faded, but she had learned to harness that pain into strength. "Evan, remember what we learned from Father Michael's teachings and from our own struggles," she said softly. "We must confront not just the darkness around us, but the darkness within ourselves. Only then can we truly triumph." Evan stepped closer, his hand gently covering hers. "I'm with you, Emily, every step of the way. We have a plan. Let us move quietly and stick to the shadows." Their voices, though low, carried the weight of countless trials and triumphs. In that moment, the bond between them felt almost tangible, a living testament to resilience and hope. Inside the mansion, the corridors were labyrinthine, their walls echoing faint, otherworldly whispers. Emily led the way, her senses attuned to every creak of the ancient floorboards and every subtle shift in the atmosphere. Evan followed closely, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. They soon encountered a narrow passageway lit by the ghostly glow of a single candle. Here, they paused as muffled chants reached their ears, a ritual in progress. Peering around the corner, Emily and Evan observed a small group of robed figures gathered around a crude altar. The air was thick with incense and the metallic tang of something unholy. One of the figures, their voice trembling with fervor, intoned words in a language that sent shivers down Emily's spine. She exchanged a quick, determined glance with Evan. "Now," whispered Emily, "we have to disrupt this ritual before they complete the binding." Evan nodded. On my signal, we create a diversion. I'll take the left flank while you move in from the right. Their plan was simple yet dangerous. Split up to confuse the cultists and seize the sacred relic at the center of the altar, a dark amulet that pulsed with an unnatural light. Before they could act, a soft voice spoke from behind a nearby pillar. It was Serena, one of their most trusted operatives, her eyes wide with both fear and determination. Emily, Evan, be careful. There are more of them than we expected. Her words added an edge of urgency to the moment, yet also reinforced the unity among the Radiant Shield members. Serena, hold your position, Emily instructed quickly. We'll need your support if things go sideways. With that, she signaled to Evan, and the pair split into the shadows. In the ensuing chaos, Evan darted around the group, knocking into a cultist and causing a brief but disorienting scuffle. The cultists' chanting faltered as they were taken by surprise, and in the confusion, Emily seized her chance. With swift, practiced movements, she slipped behind the altar and reached for the dark amulet. Its surface was cold and unnervingly smooth, and as soon as her fingers brushed against it, a jolt of energy surged through her. For a split second, memories of the binding ritual flashed before her eyes, but she forced them aside, focusing on the task at hand. A sudden shout rang out. "Get her!" one of the cultists bellowed. Evan, hearing the call, pivoted and surged toward Emily, his eyes blazing with determination. "Emily, hold on, I'm coming!" he shouted, drawing his weapon as he advanced. At that moment, the leader of the cult, a gaunt figure with eyes that burned like coals, stepped forward. "You dare interfere with the Pact of Radiance?" he hissed, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "The power we invoke will rise, and you will all fall." His arms were raised as he began to chant anew, and the dark energy in the room seemed to thicken. Emily clutched the amulet tightly, feeling its dark pulse match the rhythm of her heartbeat. "Evan," she called softly, "I need you to cover me while I secure the relic. This is our chance to break their hold once and for all." Her voice was steady despite the storm of emotion swirling within her. Evan's reply was immediate and resolute. "I've got you, Emily. No matter what happens, we stand together." His words were both a promise and a battle cry, and as he engaged the nearest cultists, their confrontation exploded into a flurry of movement and determination. The clash of voices, the crack of distant thunder, and the scent of burning incense created a surreal symphony of chaos and purpose. As the melee raged, Emily felt the amulet vibrate in her hand. The dark energy it contained pulsed in time with the sinister chants, and she knew that this relic was the linchpin of the cult's power. With a deep, steadying breath, she recalled Father Michael's words from years past about the strength that came from faith and the light within. She began to recite a counter-chant in a firm, clear voice, her tone rising above the cacophony of the battle. "By the power of the light, by the grace of all that is good, I break the bonds of darkness, and cast away what should not exist in this realm. I reclaim what is right. Let the forces of evil be banished tonight." The amulet's glow wavered as Emily's words filled the room, and for a moment, the cultists paused, their eyes wide with astonishment. The gaunt leader's face twisted in fury, as he struggled to regain control of the ritual. "No! You cannot undo what is destined," he roared, his voice a mixture of desperation and malice. Evan, seizing the opportunity, shouted over the din, "Emily, now!" With a final, determined effort, Emily channeled every bit of her inner strength into the incantation. The amulet, once a pulsating orb of dark energy, began to crack and splinter. With a resounding burst of light that illuminated the entire chamber, the relic shattered, sending shards of inky darkness scattering across the floor. A collective gasp echoed among the cultists as the oppressive atmosphere dissolved into an eerie stillness. The leader staggered back, his power seemingly evaporated in the wake of the shattering relic. "This cannot be," he cried, his voice now weak and trembling. "The pact?" His words faded as several of his followers fell to their knees, overcome by the sudden collapse of their unholy magic. In the aftermath of the explosion, silence reigned in the once chaotic chamber. Emily stood amid the ruins of the altar, her heart pounding and her hands still trembling from the intensity of the moment. Evan rushed to her side, his eyes filled with concern. "Are you all right?" he asked, gently taking her hand and helping her steady herself. Emily managed a small, exhausted smile. "I'm okay, Evan. I couldn't have done it without you." Their eyes met a silent exchange of gratitude, love, and a shared commitment to the cause that had brought them together. In the cool aftermath of the confrontation, as the remaining cultists were detained by members of the Radiant Shield, Emily and Evan found a quiet moment in a deserted corridor of the mansion. Leaning against a weathered stone wall, they allowed themselves a brief respite from the turmoil. "Do you remember when we first started this fight?" Emily mused, her voice soft as she recalled the early days of their struggle. "I was so afraid of the darkness inside me, of what it might become if I let it take control." Evan's gaze softened as he brushed a stray lock of hair from her face. "I remember," he replied. "But you transformed that fear into strength, Emily. You showed us all that even in our darkest moments, there is light worth fighting for." She looked down at the shattered remnants of the amulet, now a symbol of both past torment and newfound liberation. "That night it changed everything. I realized that we could not let fear dictate our lives. We had to stand up, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who had been touched by that darkness." Evan squeezed her hand gently. "And look at what we've accomplished since then. You've become the leader you were always meant to be, a true champion of hope. Together, we're building something that will outlast any shadow." Their conversation was interrupted by the distant hum of sirens and murmurs from other operatives. Soon, a senior member of the Radiant Shield, Cassandra, approached them. "Emily, Evan, the authorities are on their way to secure the premises. You two should head back to headquarters and debrief. We have a lot to plan for in the coming days," she said, her tone brisk but respectful. Emily nodded, determination rekindling in her eyes. "We're not done yet, Cassandra. This was only one battle. The darkness still lurks in hidden corners, waiting for its moment to strike again." Her voice was both resolute and laced with compassion, a call to arms for all who had suffered under its influence. As they made their way out of the crumbling estate, the night air was crisp and filled with the scent of rain on concrete. The city's skyline loomed in the distance, a reminder that even in the heart of urban life, the struggle between light and darkness was very real. In the days that followed, Emily and Evan worked tirelessly, rallying supporters, uncovering hidden threats, and strengthening the network of the Radiant Shield. At a press conference held in a renovated community center, Emily addressed a crowd of reporters and citizens eager for change. "We stand at a crossroads," she declared, her voice clear and impassioned. "For too long, forces of evil have sought to manipulate and control us through fear and darkness. Tonight, we say enough is enough. Together, we will build a future where hope prevails, and no one ever has to live in fear again." The room erupted in applause, and among the crowd, Evan's eyes shone with pride. Later, as they sat side by side at a small cafe near the community center, he leaned over and whispered, "You are incredible out there. You inspire me every single day." Emily reached across the table, her fingers entwining with his. "We inspire each other, Evan. And together, we're unstoppable." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, talking about plans for new initiatives, training programs for at-risk youth, and the importance of education in dispelling superstition and fear. Every word was a testament to their shared vision, a vision that had grown from the embers of a painful past into a roaring fire of determination and love. In the months that followed, the Radiant Shield expanded its reach. Emily became known not only as a fierce warrior against occult evil, but also as a compassionate leader who understood the struggles of those who had once felt hopeless. Under her guidance, community outreach programs flourished, and secret seminars were held to educate citizens about the signs of supernatural manipulation and the importance of inner strength. Evan, ever at her side, became her most trusted advisor and confidant, often mediating between various factions within the organization and ensuring that their efforts remained focused on protecting the innocent. One crisp winter evening, while Emily reviewed plans in her office adorned with relics and awards commemorating past victories, Evan knocked softly on the door. "Emily, do you have a minute?" he asked, his voice warm yet filled with urgency. "Of course," she replied, setting aside the documents. "Come in, Evan." He stepped inside, and after a brief pause he said, "I've been thinking about our next move. There's intelligence suggesting that a new coven may be attempting to resurrect an ancient pact in the abandoned industrial district. We need to act fast." Emily's eyes narrowed with resolve. "Then we gather our team and move out tonight. We can't allow them to harness that kind of power. If history has taught us anything, it's that evil left unchecked will only grow bolder." Her words were decisive, and as she spoke, the determination in her voice echoed the promise of a brighter future. That night, as they prepared to leave, Emily and Evan stood together at the entrance of their headquarters. The city lights flickered like distant stars, and the wind carried whispers of change. "Remember," Emily said, her hand resting on Evan's arm, "we fight not just with weapons, but with hope and unity. Every life we save, every act of courage, is a victory over darkness." Evan smiled, his eyes reflecting the same unwavering faith. "I wouldn't want to fight this battle with anyone else," he replied softly. Together, they stepped into the night, ready to confront whatever challenges awaited them. In their unity lay the strength of a community reborn from adversity, a community determined to stand against the forces of evil and light the way for generations to come. As the cold night air embraced them, Emily couldn't help but reflect on how far they had come. From the painful memories of a cursed ritual to becoming the vanguard of a movement dedicated to healing and hope, her journey had been arduous yet profoundly transformative. And now, with Evan by her side, she was more determined than ever to ensure that the darkness would never again claim the lives of the innocent. In the battle between light and shadow, every small victory mattered. And on that night, as the Radiant Shield mobilized to thwart a resurgence of dark power, Emily Richards emerged not only as a survivor, but as a leader, a symbol of the unbreakable human spirit, committed to turning pain into purpose and fear into freedom. Their fight was far from over, but with every challenge they faced, the bond between Emily and Evan and between all those who believed in the triumph of light grew stronger. Together, they carried the promise of a future where darkness would no longer dictate the terms of existence, and where hope, love, and unity would forever reign supreme. This story imparts a powerful message about transformation and the enduring strength of the human spirit. At its core, it teaches that even when we face profound darkness and personal betrayal, hope can be reignited through inner strength and resilience. Emily's journey from the traumatic binding of an ancient pact to emerging as a leader in the fight against occult evil reminds us that our past hardships can serve as the catalyst for growth and empowerment. Her story shows that confronting our inner demons, rather than hiding from them, is essential to healing and reclaiming our lives. Furthermore, the narrative highlights the transformative power of unity and love. The unbreakable bond between Emily and Evan, along with the solidarity of the Radiant Shield, underscores that no battle against darkness is fought alone. When individuals join forces with a shared purpose, their combined courage and determination can overcome even the most insidious forces. Ultimately, the story is a testament to the idea that light can always prevail over darkness when we have faith, compassion, and the willingness to stand up for what is right. These lessons resonate deeply, encouraging us to turn our pain into purpose and fight relentlessly for a better, brighter future. Dear friend, today's story ends here. I wish you good health and see you in the next video. The first snowflakes of the season fell gently on the bustling streets of Chicago as the evening rush merged into a blur of glowing headlights, hurried footsteps, and misty breaths clouding the chilly air. At the corner of South Wacker Drive, nestled between a shuttered storefront and a wall adorned with bold graffiti, Lily Carter sat on a pile of worn blankets, clutching her knees tightly. Her small, trembling hands, chilled by the cold, belied the fierce determination in her wide hazel eyes as she gazed at the glamorous world passing by, endless parades of warm coats, polished boots, and shopping bags bursting with gifts she could only dream about. Although only 8 years old, Lily's eyes held a wisdom and sorrow far beyond her years of burden earned from a lifetime of hardship. Beside her, her mother, Janet, lay curled up beneath a thin scarf, her frail body shuddering with coughs that offered little protection against the biting winter. The sound of her soft, labored breathing had become a constant, wrenching reminder for Lily that time was running short. As darkness deepened, Lily's hunger gnawed at her. Though it was not the hunger that pained her most, it was the terror of awakening one day to find her mother gone. Janet's gentle whisper barely reached Lily's ears. "You need to rest, my love." "I'm fine, Mom." With a trembling smile, Lily wrapped an arm around her mother's frail shoulders, concealing the truth inside her heart in an effort to protect Janet from further sorrow. Suddenly, a sleek black limousine glided to a stop in front of an upscale restaurant. Lily's gaze shifted, her curiosity piqued as she watched a tall man in a perfectly tailored coat step out. The streetlight cast a warm glow over him, highlighting his chiseled jawline and carefully styled dark hair framing a stern, yet enigmatic face. His name was Ethan Mitchell, but to Lily he resembled a character straight from the fairy tales her mother once read to her tales of princes and magic before the world had turned so cruel. Ethan paused on the sidewalk to adjust his coat lapel and check his phone. Even from afar, Lily sensed the cool detachment in his posture, the way he carried himself, as if untouched by the hardships that plagued others. A man like him never fretted about where his next meal would come from. He didn't sleep on the streets or beg for spare change. Lily's heart began to race as a wild, desperate idea took hold, ridiculous and impossible, yet the only way to save her beloved mother from dying alone. Without a second thought, she leapt to her feet and dashed toward Ethan, weaving determinedly through the crowd. Her worn sneakers whispered on the pavement, while her small voice cut through the city's noise. "Excuse me, sir, please wait." Ethan halted mid-step, frowning as he turned to see the fragile girl approaching. Her thin frame was draped in a tattered coat several sizes too large, and her face was pale from the cold. For a fleeting moment, he assumed she was merely another beggar until he noticed the fierce spark of courage burning in her eyes. "What is it?" he asked, his tone edged with impatience despite his better judgment. Taking a deep breath and clutching the hem of her coat, Lily looked up at him with eyes full of hope and fear. "Will you marry me?" The words hung in the air, as absurd and fragile as glass teetering on the brink of collapse. For a second, Ethan hesitated. Marry you? He repeated in disbelief, his tone softening as he struggled to process her request. What kind of joke is this? It isn't a joke, Lily replied firmly, her eyes glistening while she fought back tears. I need you to marry me for one day. If you do, I'll be your princess, and you'll be my prince. And you can help my mom, she is sick, and we have no money. Ethan's jaw tightened as memories of desperate pleas he'd encountered before, people who begged, lied, and manipulated to get what they wanted flooded back. But something about Lily was different. She wasn't simply begging. She was making a deal, and the conviction in her voice stirred an unfamiliar unease within him. Glancing past her, he saw Janet sitting on the sidewalk, coughing into her hands. Her hollow cheeks and sunken eyes silently told the story of suffering that words could not express. Ethan averted his eyes quickly, as if the reality of their pain was too much to bear. I'm sorry, he said quietly, stepping back. I can't help you. Lily's small hand shot out and grasped the sleeve of his coat. Please, she whispered, her voice cracking. Just listen, my mom is all I have. If you help her, I promise I won't trouble you again. Something in her plea pierced through Ethan's carefully constructed defenses. He wasn't sure if it was the desperation in her voice or the haunting resemblance she bore to someone he once knew, a memory he'd long tried to bury deep within himself. Sighing, he ran a hand through his hair as he struggled to shake off the creeping unease. This is crazy, he muttered to himself. But before he could retreat, his phone buzzed with a message from his assistant. Dinner meeting postponed. Exhaling slowly, his breath visible in the cold night air, Ethan crouched down to Lily's level and met her gaze. If I agree to listen, he said cautiously, you have to tell me everything, no lies. Lily's heart pounded as she nodded. Okay, I promise. Rising, Ethan offered his hand. Come on then. Let us get you and your mother out of the cold. Inside the back of the limousine, Lily sat with Janet, who had finally succumbed to sleep, her head resting against her daughter's shoulder. Ethan watched them in silence, his mind racing with questions. He wasn't sure why he had agreed to this unlikely arrangement. Perhaps it was guilt, or maybe deep down, he saw a part of himself in Lily, lost, desperate, and clinging to hope. As the car sped through the busy streets of downtown Chicago, Ethan's phone buzzed again, a message from his longtime friend and lawyer, Daniel Reynolds. We need to talk, urgent. Ethan frowned, but decided to ignore it for now. Whatever Daniel had to say could wait. He had just made a decision that would irrevocably alter all their lives, and there was no turning back. The warmth of the limousine was a welcome change from the biting cold outside. Lily sat quietly, her small fingers intertwined with her mother's as Janet slept peacefully. The rhythmic hum of the engine provided a strange sense of calm, yet Lily's heart still raced with hope and uncertainty. Meanwhile, Ethan Mitchell sat across from them, leaning back in his seat with one hand resting under his chin, his gaze flickering between the slumbering woman and the little girl who had upended his otherwise predictable evening. The silence was heavy, yet Ethan's mind remained restless. How old are you? He asked softly. 8, Lily replied, her voice barely above a whisper. But Mama says I'm almost 9. Ethan smiled faintly at her attempt to sound older. Do you live on the streets? He probed gently. Lily hesitated, as if admitting the truth would render their situation unbearably real. We used to have a small apartment before Mama got sick, but then she couldn't work, so we lost our home. Ethan's jaw tightened as he listened. He knew what it was like to grow up without a stable home, bouncing from foster care after the tragic loss of his own parents, feeling helpless and abandoned. Hearing Lily's story stirred something deep within him. "How long has your mom been sick?" he asked. Lily bit her lip. "A few months. At first it was just a cough, but then it got worse, and now she can barely walk without getting tired." Ethan's gaze softened as he took in the sight of Janet, whose shallow, labored breathing even in sleep revealed a woman in desperate need of help. He wanted to believe this was just another sad story he could ignore, but deep down he knew better. Was he the type of man who could stand by and let suffering continue? Not this time. Soon, the limousine pulled into the circular driveway of a luxurious hotel, its golden lights casting a warm glow over the snowy landscape. Lily's eyes widened as she peered out the window in awe. "Where are we?" she asked, her voice trembling with wonder. "A hotel," Ethan replied gently. "You and your mother will stay here tonight. I'll arrange for a doctor to come see her." Lily's eyes filled with tears of relief. "Really? You mean it?" "Yes," Ethan said firmly, "but first, let us get you both inside and warmed up." The hotel staff greeted Ethan with the kind of deference reserved for royalty, though Lily barely noticed, too busy marveling at the sparkling chandeliers, marble floors, and a grand staircase that curved upward like something out of a fairy tale. Ethan guided them to a private suite on the top floor where a fire crackled in the fireplace, casting a cozy glow over elegant furnishings. A plush king-size bed dominated the room, piled high with pillows and blankets soft as clouds. Lily helped her mother settle in, carefully tucking the blankets around Janet's frail body. Janet stirred briefly, murmuring Lily's name before drifting back into sleep. Lily sat beside her, brushing a stray lock of hair from her mother's face, while Ethan stood by the window, watching the snow fall against the city skyline. His phone vibrated again. This time it was Daniel. "I've been trying to reach you all night," Daniel's voice crackled, a blend of concern and frustration. "What is going on?" Ethan glanced over at Lily, now curled up beside her mother. "I met someone tonight, a little girl named Lily Carter. She and her mom are homeless, and her mom is very sick. I'm helping them." There was a pause on the other end. "Helping them? How?" Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I don't know yet, but couldn't he just leave them out there?" Daniel's tone softened. "Nate, you have a big heart, I know that, but you also have a lot to lose. Be careful." "I will," Ethan replied quietly, ending the call. He wasn't sure what he had just committed to, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like he was finally doing something meaningful. The doctor arrived within the hour, a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He examined Janet carefully, while Lily watched anxiously from the foot of the bed. Ethan stood by the door, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. After what felt like an eternity, the doctor approached him. "Her condition is serious, pneumonia compounded by severe malnutrition and exhaustion. She'll need immediate treatment and proper nutrition to recover." Ethan nodded. "Do whatever you have to do, I'll cover the costs." The doctor hesitated. "She needs rest, but there is something else." Lowering his voice, he added, "Her body is very weak. If she doesn't respond to treatment soon, she may not have much time left." Ethan's chest tightened as he glanced at Lily, who was now stroking her mother's hand and whispering comforting words. The weight of responsibility pressed down on him like never before. "Your mom is going to get the help she needs," he said softly to Lily, kneeling beside her. "But you have to be strong for her, okay?" Lily looked up, tears brimming in her eyes. "I will." Ethan hesitated, then gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "Why did you ask me to marry you?" Lily smiled through her tears. "Because in the stories, Princes always save princesses, and I needed someone to save us." Ethan swallowed hard. Her words struck him like a knife. He wasn't a prince, he was a man with a past so dark it could swallow them both, but in that moment he wished with all his heart that he could be the hero Lily believed him to be. As the fire crackled in the background, Ethan made a silent promise. He didn't know where this journey would lead, but he would do everything in his power to protect her, even if it meant confronting the demons he'd spent years running from. Morning light crept through heavy curtains, bathing the suite in a soft glow. Lily stirred on an armchair, still wrapped in one of the hotel's plush blankets, and glanced toward the bed where Janet rested. Her breathing had steadied, and though her face remained pale, Lily sensed a miraculous improvement. Ethan, dressed in a crisp white shirt and tailored slacks, stood by the window with a cup of coffee in hand. He didn't look like a man tormented by sleepless nights, yet just hours earlier he'd barely closed his eyes. "Good morning," he greeted as he noticed Lily stirring. "Morning, Mr. Mitchell," Lily replied softly, rubbing her eyes. After a moment's hesitation, she asked, "Did the doctor come back?" "He'll be back this afternoon," Ethan replied, setting his coffee down on the table. "Your mom needs rest, but she is stable for now." Lily let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Stable, it's not much, but it's enough to give me hope." Ethan sat down on the sofa across from her, his gaze steady yet kind. "We need to talk," he said gently. Lily sat up straighter, clutching the edge of her blanket. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," Ethan quickly reassured her. "But I need to understand, why did you really ask me to marry you?" Lily's eyes glistened as she fiddled with the blanket. "Because I knew you could help us. When you stepped out of that fancy car, you looked important, like someone who could fix things. Mama always said fairy tales aren't real, but I thought maybe, just once, they could be." Ethan leaned back, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'm not a prince, Lily." "You don't have to be a real prince," she whispered. "You just have to care." The simplicity of her words struck him deeply. She didn't want his money or status, she simply wanted someone who cared. Ethan exhaled slowly, rubbing his temples, as he wrestled with the enormity of his next step. "Okay," he finally said in a steady voice, "here's what we're going to do. I'll take care of your mom's medical bills, and make sure she gets the best treatment possible." Lily's eyes widened with hope. "Really?" "Really," Ethan confirmed, then added, "but there's a condition. We'll have a symbolic wedding, a small ceremony just for you, your mom, and a few people I trust. It won't be real, but it'll be enough to make you feel like a princess for a day. And after that, I need you to trust me, no more running around asking strangers for help. I'll take care of things from here." Lily considered his words carefully. Though she didn't understand everything, she knew this was her chance to save her mother, and she wouldn't let it slip away. "I promise," she said firmly. "I won't bother anyone else, just help Mama." Satisfied, Ethan smiled. "Good. Now let us get you some breakfast." Inside the hotel dining room, the aroma of freshly baked pastries, sizzling bacon, and brewed coffee filled the air. Lily's eyes widened at the sight of the buffet, her mouth watering as she took in the spread. Ethan handed her a plate, and after a brief hesitation, she piled it high with pancakes, sausages, and fruit. Ethan couldn't help but smile at her infectious enthusiasm. It reminded him of simpler times, before life had twisted him into the man he had become. As Lily polished off her second helping, Ethan's phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen and saw Daniel's name flashing. Reluctantly, he answered, "Are you at the office yet?" "No," Ethan replied. "I'm still with Lily and her mom." A pause ensued before Daniel sighed heavily. Nate, I know you want to help them, but be careful. You're already in deep. If anyone finds out. Ethan's tone turned sharp. I'm handling it, he interrupted. Daniel's voice lowered. You always think you can do it all alone, but this isn't just about you anymore. These people, this little girl you brought into your life, what if your past catches up with you? Ethan clenched his jaw. It won't. How can you be so sure? Because I've spent years tying up every loose end, Ethan replied, though Daniel was right. Lily and her mom had changed everything. I'll call you later, he said, ending the call. Later that afternoon, the doctor returned to check on Janet. Her condition had improved slightly, though she still faced a long road ahead. Ethan arranged for her transfer to a private clinic for round-the-clock care. As they prepared to leave the hotel, Lily clutched Ethan's hand tightly, her small fingers as if clinging to a lifeline. Where are we going now? She asked, her voice a mix of hope and fear. To the clinic, Ethan replied. Your mom will be taken care of there. And after that we take it one step at a time. I promise you're not alone anymore. Lily's grip tightened. She said nothing, but her silence spoke volumes. She was trusting him to keep that promise. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't sure if he was ready for such responsibility, but he had already taken the first step, and there was no turning back. In the days that followed, as the clinic became a temporary haven from the bitter cold, Lily's laughter, Janet's slow recovery, and Ethan's own inner battles intertwined into a tapestry of hope and haunting memories. Ethan's phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from Daniel, whose warnings about Ethan's troubled past echoed in his mind. Yet every time he looked at Lily so brave, so innocent, it bolstered his determination to protect them both. Over time, the fragile peace in the clinic was shattered by unsettling revelations. A call from Daniel later one night hinted at a dark secret. Janet, who had been working as a housekeeper for the Mitchell family before the catastrophic fire that took Ethan's parents, might have known more than she had ever admitted. Memories of that fateful night, the acrid smell of smoke, the sound of crackling flames, and the overwhelming panic came flooding back to Ethan. He recalled being only 7 years old, left to piece together the fragments of a life shattered by tragedy. Determined to uncover the truth, Ethan found himself drawn into a bitter investigation that intertwined his own past with the desperate present. In whispered phone calls and hushed conversations, Daniel, his longtime friend and lawyer, revealed that Ethan's estranged uncles Stephen Adams and Richard Adams had orchestrated not only the fire that claimed his parents, but also a vast embezzlement scheme involving the family trust. The trust fund, meant to secure the future of his mother, had instead become the instrument of a vicious betrayal. Ethan's resolve hardened as he vowed to dismantle the uncle's criminal empire piece by piece. With the help of a brave whistleblower, Patrick Morgan, a former accountant who had witnessed the embezzlement firsthand, and a reluctant witness named Henry Clark, who had seen the uncles arming themselves with gasoline on that fateful night, Ethan began reopening the investigation that had been buried under layers of lies and deceit. Every document uncovered, every testimony recorded, further illuminated the depths of the betrayal. Late one chilly evening, while Ethan paced the quiet halls of the clinic, his phone rang. It was Daniel again, his tone urgent. I've found something, Nate. Your uncles not only planned the fire, they did it to seize control of the family trust. And they've been laundering millions through offshore accounts ever since. Ethan's blood ran cold as the gravity of Daniel's words sank in. It wasn't just a matter of saving Lily and Janet anymore. It was about reclaiming his family's honor and securing justice for the life that had been stolen from him. Ethan's investigation led him deep into a labyrinth of corporate corruption, old family secrets, and bitter revenge. In a series of tense meetings, clandestine phone calls, and midnight rendezvous, he pieced together the final clues. One day, after months of uncertainty, Ethan found himself standing before an aging man in a modest home on the outskirts of a small Midwestern town. The man, Henry Clark, hesitated before finally recounting the events of that terrible night, the heated argument between his uncles and Ethan's mother, the deliberate spreading of gasoline, and the inevitable blaze that had reduced everything to ash. "Did you try to stop them?" Ethan demanded, his voice trembling with barely contained rage. Henry's eyes filled with regret. "I wanted to, but by the time I got close, the flames had already taken hold. I was scared, terrified of what they might do if I spoke out." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on Henry's shoulder. "We're going to make this right. Your testimony is the key to finally taking them down." With Henry's and Patrick's evidence secured, Ethan and Daniel prepared to present their case to the district attorney. In a tense courtroom filled with reporters and silent witnesses, Patrick Morgan took the stand, his hand shaking as he detailed the massive financial fraud and the uncle's involvement in the arson. Henry Clark's testimony, long delayed and laden with fear, further corroborated the devastating truth. The fire had been no accident, and the betrayal ran deep within his own bloodline. As the trial unfolded, Ethan's voice rang out in his closing statement, a powerful, emotional plea for justice. "I was 7 when my parents died," he began, his voice thick with sorrow and determination. "For years, I believed it was a tragic accident. But now I know the truth. My uncles didn't just steal our money, they stole my family. They took away everything I loved, and they tried to erase any hope of a future. Today, I ask you to hold them accountable, not just for me, but for everyone whose life they've ruined." The jury's verdict came like a tidal wave. Guilty on all charges, the uncles were led away in handcuffs to the sound of gasps and murmurs echoing through the courtroom. Relief and heartbreak warred within Ethan as he clutched Lily close. "Does this mean the bad guys are gone?" she asked in a soft, hopeful voice. "Yes, princess," he whispered, his voice cracking with emotion. "They won't hurt us anymore." In the days that followed, as the media frenzy slowly subsided, Ethan, Janet, and Lily began to rebuild their shattered lives. Together, they moved into a charming house on the outskirts of the city, a modest home surrounded by a white picket fence and a lush garden filled with blooming flowers. In that safe haven, Lily's laughter and innocent dreams of a castle and a forever family took on new meaning. Over shared breakfasts and quiet evenings, Ethan, who had once been haunted by his past, found solace in the love and trust that now defined his new family. Though the scars of betrayal and loss remained, they were slowly replaced by the promise of a brighter future, a future where every step forward was taken together. In a gentle conversation one morning, as Lily showed Ethan a drawing of a garden with a grand house, she exclaimed, "This is our new home where we can be happy always." Ethan knelt beside her, his eyes soft with resolve. "We'll find the perfect place, sweetheart. I promise." Later that day, as the sun set and bathed their new home in a warm golden glow, Ethan sat by the window, watching the city lights twinkle against the darkening sky. For the first time in years, he felt the heavy burden of his past slowly lift. With Janet's gentle strength and Lily's unyielding hope by his side, he realized that the journey to justice had not only reclaimed what was lost, it had also given him something he had long forgotten: home. And though shadows of the past might occasionally creep in, Ethan knew that together they would face whatever challenges lay ahead. Their fight was over not because revenge had been exacted, but because love and truth had prevailed. As the night grew quiet, and Lily slept peacefully in Janet's arms, Ethan allowed himself a rare moment of peace. He had found his family, and with them, he would always have a reason to keep fighting for justice, for love,